Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all well. Probably a little bit damp, but thank you so much for struggling through the rain to get here. My name's Helen Milner. I'm the Group Chief Executive at Good Things Foundation. We're a national and international digital inclusion charity working with thousands of community organisations across the country to fix the digital divide. Fantastic. So let's kick off. Let's start by introducing ourselves. So Samantha, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name's Samantha Niblett. I am a newly elected Member of Parliament for South Derbyshire, but before that I was the founder of Labour Women in Tech, which is campaigning to get more girls and women into tech and STEM careers more broadly. That was easy. How easily, please.
Yeah, just get down the line.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Hafsha Shaikh. I'm from Birmingham. I'm a digital hub and a National Data Bank Centre as well, and an Ambassador Centre for the Good Things Foundation. Thank you.
Brilliant. Hi, everybody. I'm Rob Benson. I'm the Digital Inclusion Lead for Liverpool City Region Command Authority. So we're the Command Authority led by Steve Rotherham, our Mayor, and we work across our 6 local authority areas to tackle digital exclusion through national and local partners and really helping to tackle the digital divide.
Okay, I'm Simeon Yates. I'm Professor of Digital Culture at the University of Liverpool, and I do a lot of research on digital inequalities in different guises and different domains, and I work closely with everybody on the panel, trying to take the research and make it useful for policy.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Shah. I lead responsible AI at Accenture, which is a technology professional services firm. So we build technology and help companies deploy it. And my job is to help them do that responsibly. Prior to Accenture, I spent a number of years in regulation looking at the privacy rights issues around the use of technology. And prior to that, many years at the BBC in various sort of technical roles. I'm a lapsed engineer by trade before I got into policy.
Fantastic, thank you. And thank you so much to the University of Liverpool for organising and supporting this fringe event. I'm going to start with a quote from Peter Kyle, who's the Secretary of State at the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. In September, he said, "It is also too easy to think of technology such as AI as being impersonal, alienating or distant. But the first thing I think about when it comes to AI is people." And I think that's going to be a real theme in this afternoon's panel event, that this is about technology, but it's also about people. As I said, Good Things Foundation is a digital inclusion charity, so we're very much focused around fixing the digital divide, about those digital inequalities, but also now, of course, as new technologies come on board, like AI, those AI technologies. As you'll see on the Digital Nation, there's 8.5 million people who lack the basic digital skills that they need, and there's 2.4 million households where they can't afford their mobile phone and contract. Oh, I'm trying to get it right because I've got a professor sitting next to me.
I'm the one who's going to get it wrong.
And the other thing that you'll see on the Digital Nation is that I'm sure you've all used the internet many, many times today, and I'm sure we'll hear from panellists about how important that is. But something that really sticks out to me is that 33% of people who can't use the internet find it difficult to engage with the NHS. So actually that digital divide is broad and it is deep, and that actually is excluding people from some of the essential things that we all take for granted. Inequality is bad for people, but it's also really bad for growth. So we know that by fixing the digital divide, we bring £13.7 billion into the economy. And at conference, there's a lot of talk about fixing the foundations, but actually that digital divide is one of those foundations, and therefore to build upon those foundations, we need to fix that digital divide. And by looking at how we bring digital inclusion alongside other policy areas, such as economic inactivity, for example, if we grow economic activity from 78% to 80%, we will bring £23 billion a year into the economy. So I'm sure everybody here is very passionate about ending inequalities and reducing inequalities, but it's also very, very good for growth as well. So success will be cross-sector. So I'm really delighted that we have a wonderful cross-sector panel here this evening, and you can really it's going to be a rich discussion, and I will come to you for questions, but actually a really rich discussion looking at it from all of our different perspectives, and hopefully with some ideas of how we can create success for the future. But this is about data, and so I'm going to hand over to the professor. Simeon Yates, you're going to talk through some of the key data for us.
So sadly, academics can't do a talk without PowerPoint. So an awful lot of data on the screen. I'm not going to talk through every point because that would take forever. I think the key thing to take away here as you go through all of these different figures is that many of us live in a world where we don't worry about our digital access. Not everybody, but many of us live in a world, I live in a world where I don't worry about my digital access. So my kids have got lots of access, they've got lots of devices to do their education on. I use it for work, quite happily, work from home at a distance, and so on. But if you start looking at these figures up here, and we start with adults, we've still got an awful lot of adults who are not online full stop. But we've also got an awful lot of adults, including young people, young adults, that 18 to 35-year-old age, who are limited digital users. They don't do that much online. They're mainly smartphone-only device users. So in other words, they might count in the statistics for being online, but they're not getting the benefits of being online. And as Helen just said, if your local GP goes online, or your local school now expects you to interact with it online, and you don't have that kit and that service, then you are functionally disconnected from key social services, key kind of services that government provides, key services that your community might provide. So if you look at the figures there on adults, there's an awful lot of adults in that circumstance. And then you look at the young people, accessing education now needs to be more than just on your smartphone. Nearly all homework now is set online. But you will hear those conversations I've been in those where you're at your parents' evening of families saying, can the teacher print out the stuff for the child to take home because they don't have internet access? How can we, get people out of poverty? How can we raise the bar? We can fix the foundations if a large number of our children are attempting to do their maths homework or their English homework or their geography homework for their GCSEs, foundational stuff, on a tiny screen, There's something we've tried to do then as a team, working with Good Things Foundation, Loughborough University, various other universities in the UK and Ireland, and so on, is try and bring this all together. So we've got some data there about households. And here's the shocking one. So we actually asked households across the UK with kids, households with kids at the moment. We're going to do the other household types from now till next year. All of this funded by the Nuffield Foundation and Nominet and the Welsh Government, and now the Scottish Government. We asked households themselves what they need such that they won't start to suffer inequalities. What's the absolute minimum in terms of broadband, kit, but also skills, what you need to do with the devices, and also being safe online. What's the minimum parents and kids need? And we asked children as well, and we kind of put that list together and got them to agree the minimum list. And then we did a national survey of UK households, and we find that 45% of UK households with children do not meet the minimum that UK households with children themselves agreed over multiple deliberative discussions. A bit like the minimum income standard that Loughborough does for income, about what's enough such that you don't fall into poverty. This is the digital equivalent. That's the world that most kids in education and parents trying to get their kids through education, or parents engaging with the school or with healthcare are actually in. And we're about to start a project with Alder Hay to look at, well, if you've got a kid with a long-term health condition and we're going to do wards at home, what's that going to play out for the people who are digitally disconnected? And lastly, I've only got 5 minutes, AI, we're all talking about it. It's all either exciting or incredibly scary, or both. There are loads of economic potential benefits. There are loads of possible benefits for everything from the NHS, to nearly every aspect of day-to-day life. Yet, as Future.now will tell you, 54% of the UK workforce don't have the basic essential digital skills for work, or the full 20 that the government thinks is a minimum for the workplace. So how do we bring people into an AI-ready workplace if they don't even have the basic digital skills? And this is fresh off the press. Another project we're doing is looking at AI and data analytics in the workplace, and we find similarly about 50% of the UK workforce doesn't have confidence in engaging with things like data analytics and AI in the workplace, or even kind of know where to start and understand it. So again, if we're going to start using AI to fix the foundations or to support economic growth, we've got half the workforce to bring with us still, and they're post-education. And we know from prior work with DSIT, those intervention points are really hard, and this is what, Good Things tries to do, is get people into that situation where they've got those skills to engage with a digital society. Hopefully I'm inside my 5
Lovely.
minutes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, Simeon. Can everybody hear okay at the back? Yes, good. It's just that next door they're obviously wind the clock, because obviously it happened next door. And if you do want to sit down, I'm sure people don't mind if you want people to shuffle up or to sit in. So this panel is looking at what the data says and what the public thinks. So what is the public perception of digital exclusion, digital transformation and AI? So Hafsha, you work in the community. What do you think the public think?
An awful lot, but then not an awful lot as well. So I want to talk to you all a little bit really about the work that we've been doing in the communities. So our work, first of all, is all about engagement. It's about raising awareness and it's about developing skills. And I'm going to share with you over the next few minutes just some of the perceptions really and experiences of people who we work with in the community in Balsall Heath in Birmingham. Balsall Heath is an incredibly deprived area in Birmingham. Let me introduce you to the communities. In the UK, 1 in 6 people struggle with poor adult literacy. In Balsall Heath in Birmingham, that figure drops down as low as 1 in 3. Pre-COVID, that was our biggest challenge. How do we improve the literacy and the language rates in this area? That was the main theme behind our work. Now, we face an even bigger challenge of digital exclusion. Working with communities who are part of, as Simeon's figures have just shown us, 2 million adults who are offline. 1 in 10 households who can't afford broadband. And the communities who we work with, they form one of the 8.5 million adults who lack those basic essential digital skills. But I have to say, the communities don't feel digitally excluded. Like the young mother of 5 struggling with depression and the physicality that depression brings her. She feels that she's digitally included because her oldest child, a mere 11 years old, is quite adept at ordering food for his siblings using Uber Eats app that he downloaded on Mom's phone. So as far as she's concerned, she's not digitally excluded. Nor is Shazia. She's not digitally excluded because she can actually shop online. Her children have downloaded the Shein and Temu app for her on her phone. They've very successfully saved all her payment details and her personal address details. So Shazia, this is her nighttime routine. As her husband sleeps, she's on those apps shopping online. And because her children have very kindly saved all those details for her, moving everything from basket to purchase is really simple. At her nighttime activity, she does this whilst her husband is sleeping, and it's brilliant, she says, because she hasn't got online banking. So it's really easy to hide those bank statements away when they arrive. They remain unopened. Both of them are still coming to our classes, learning to access and read emails. So that helps them too, because they are able to remain oblivious to those scam emails that some of those websites then send them. Sometimes, I have to admit, working in the community, I feel we should change the narrative. And I think to myself, is it really the communities who are being left behind? Or is it actually digital world and AI not having the capability to understand their needs, their abilities, and able to keep up with them. I sometimes think about these supermarket loyalty cards. You can only access them online. But if you have that supermarket discount card, you actually save tens, hundreds of pounds, which all go into this wonderful virtual saving pot. Now just think, if every family had those on their phone, they would be part of that world, saving financially. But they're not able to do it, and nobody really has the time to help them to download those apps on their phone. But then I think to myself, I know they're losing out financially, but what about these companies as well? What about the supermarkets? They're losing out because those people, those customers, they don't actually form part of that digital world where people can grab their data, where those supermarkets can form part of their algorithms and data analysis. So I suppose really, in some way, they are digitally excluded too. And healthcare too. We all know that providers now are pushing everyone online. All the services are now going online because healthcare needs to improve efficiency and patient care by providing more and more online solutions. But regionally, we see socioeconomic health inequalities intensifying. Healthy life expectancy is simply stagnating. Economic inactivity and that ever-increasing mental health crises in both young and old. And it's all partly due to so many in the community not being able to access online services to do simple things like, virtual consultations, booking online GP appointments, or accessing proactive healthcare tools and checks, all of which will improve their health. I do want to now, I don't want it to be all gloom and doom because it's not. I do want to end on a high to show that actually that coordinated bottom-up, top-down approach does work. I want to tell you about Dustin, a lovely lady in her 70s. Dustin came along to one of our digital health days. She came along because she needed some data from the National Data Bank. Now, we helped her with data, but while she was there, we also helped her to download the NHS app. We spent time with her showing her how to navigate it, how to book her appointments, how to repeat her prescriptions. And Dustin, an amazing lady, because she came from a situation where she was digitally excluded. But now this lady is able to book her appointments, do all those things, but she actually goes round to other elderly people in her supported housing association, and she tells them, and then she gets their phone out and she downloads the app for them. An amazing thing. So I think for me, in the communities, yes, it's clear we do need to fix that digital divide to help us all, but we need it so we can help the communities to really become more resilient financially and better able to understand their financial world.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I'm sure people have lots of questions for you. And I think it's really nice you talked about bottom up and top down. And so, Rob, you're sort of sitting in the middle, right? I'm sure lots of local community organisations in Liverpool City region think that you are the top, right? Yeah. But obviously at that regional level. So obviously you do a lot of work in communities around Liverpool City region. What's your experience of what people think about the digital transformation and AI?
Absolutely, yeah. So, echoes a lot of what Hafsha's been saying. Our kind of mantra within the City region, the work we try to do is where you tend to find a lot of deprivation, you find digital deprivation to go alongside it. So when you're examining those socioeconomic issues, you've got digital poverty within that as well. And that's the kind of approach we've taken, is working with our 6 local authorities. They've been doing this for a very long time. This is not a new issue, unfortunately. This has been going on since the advent of the internet. Obviously, things have got worse recently with the cost of living crisis. More people are being put at risk of being digitally excluded. It is, a fourth utility effectively now. People cannot live a modern digital life without access to the internet, and that is across access to devices, access to connectivity connectivity, so whether that's wireless, whether that's fixed line broadband, access to the skills, so the things from actually turning on a device to actually fully using it, and those digital skills that are needed for the workplace, and then the actual motivational hook for that as well. So, rather than, forcing this digital by default kind of approach where, you must do council tax online, you must do your services. It's actually why, and I think Hafsha really brought to life in terms of the benefits that being digitally enabled can bring. That is quicker access in terms of healthcare, not having to ring up your GP every morning, being able to do your online prescriptions on the app, being able to access, things like WhatsApp and social media, speaking to your friends and family, things that we all take for granted in this room. I'm sure many of us have had to endure many Microsoft Teams calls, having access to that is becoming an ability for us to remote work and all this kind of focus. So it very much is the work that we try to do is looking about how we can put the end user at the heart of what we do and make sure that the 1.6 million people that live in the Liverpool City region have what they need to live that modern digital life. And that's why we've tried to look and examine that data, and it is kind of very broad. It brings in a lot of the kind of national data sets that Simeon talked about, work across the Lloyd's Digital Consumer Index, the Good Things Foundation, and then localizing that as well. So we know in the city region about 28% of our residents don't have those digital skills needed for everyday life. We know that there are about 325,000 people that are low or non-users of the internet, so aren't using it, whether or not it's because of they don't have the skills, or they can't afford it, or for what are those kind of different reasons. And then we look at some of that national data as well. So only 8% of individuals that are in households that are on things like universal credit and pension credit that can be on things called social tariffs, so these are discounted rates to get cheaper broadband, are taking them up. So that's a huge segment of the population that aren't aware of the kind of benefits that being on lower kind of social tariffs to help them kind of drive that and fix that digital divide within that sense. So what we're trying to do is obviously bring together our kind of local authorities, our community groups, adding value to that from some coordination from the Command Authority, whether that's both funding through things like UK Shared Prosperity Fund, whether that is through coordinated action and activity, so that we are leveraging in some of those national partners, which I know we'll talk about later in terms of that social value and that business involvement, but then also around ensuring that across those different themes that Hafsha mentioned around things like health, education, making sure that there is that digital link all the time. So we've got, about 65,000 young people on free school meals in the city region. We know from the data from things like Nominet's Digital Youth Index, about 23% of those people don't have access to broadband. So imagine your child not being able to do things that we take for granted in terms of homework or accessing their attendance records. And this is the issue that we have, unfortunately, in the city region, because 10% of our neighbourhoods within our 6 local authorities fall within some of the most deprived IMD data kind of deciles across the region, whether that's Knowsley, elements of Liverpool. So we really have to look at it from that perspective and make sure that as we kind of move on this digital journey, and we're talking about the advent of AI, but AI obviously is kind of down there at the moment, and that's the kind of future, but it is bringing it in. We've got to fix those foundations, as you've talked about, in terms of making sure that everybody has what they need in terms of that minimum standard. So they've got the access to devices, they've got the access to the right skills they need, they've got that motivational hook, and they've got that connectivity as well. And it is that holistic package. You can't do one without the other. So it's about how we work on a multi-partner approach. And very much so, from the Command Authority, we are at the top and that strategic level across our 6 local authorities. But what we want to make sure is those that are delivering that activity, and they've been delivering it fantastically over many years, have the resources that they need to continue delivering that. And actually we can leverage in those different partners to really kind of make an impact in terms of driving this forward.
Fantastic, fantastic. So Samantha, you're a new MP and a backbench MP, so I'll be kind to you.
Thank you.
I mean, it's absolute breath of fresh air for us in the digital inclusion sector to have a government who's prioritising digital inclusion, so that's absolutely fantastic. So from your point of view, I mean, obviously both from your constituency point of view, but also what would you like to see the government do around digital inclusion?
Okay, first things first, there is no silver bullet, but I think starting from a position of having the political will to do it is a good thing. We were talking briefly before the panel started, and number one priority is lifting people out of poverty. So actually, the bare minimum, people can afford the devices, people can afford the data, people can afford to be connected to broadband. There are a few things that are starting already. In the King's speech, we heard of, like 40 bills that we're pushing through, really ambitious and bold plan in the first part of this Parliament. One of them was around, we all know that, breaking down barriers to opportunity was one of our key missions, and it continues to be a key mission. Education needs a massive overhaul, starting right from early years through to lifelong learning, and it is a priority for us. But as Simeon was referring to, Future.now, who I'm a massive fan of the work of, have identified that even people in the workplace are lacking digital skills. There's a list of about 30 things, isn't there, that everybody should be able to do to be digitally savvy. I can't do them all. I can't do them all. And I have spent, most of my career working in data and technology. So there are a couple of things that we are prioritising. One, we have created Skills England. So that is, working with education organisations, unions and businesses to establish where there are key skills shortages so that we can start addressing those. We're reforming the apprenticeship levy so it can be far better spent, that money spent and invested in the areas where actually people need those skills. So I think that's that in itself, I think, shows ambition and drive. And then this is slightly loosely connected, but the Digital Information and Smart Data Bill, this is all about sort of making it easier to use your data to access services. So, for instance, if you go to, if you try and use HMRC, online, if you are trying to access services with the NHS, all of these systems that are government systems are disparate and separate, and you should. And I say this as a person who more than 20 years ago was working for Experian, and we were talking about creating a unique reference number where essentially this urn, as we called it, would have all your information assigned to that single number, and you could almost hand that over to any business, and that would be this like lock and key thing to access services. And I can't believe that 20 years later we're still not there yet. But actually coming back to tech and digital skills more broadly, and we refer to AI as being exciting and scary in equal measure. I always see everything as an opportunity. I remember over 20 years ago working for Experian. I know I don't look old enough. We were talking about big data back then. And I remember at the time, nobody really knew what it meant other than it was structured and unstructured data. And structured data was, written word and text, and unstructured was like images. And now we just like take it for granted. We go on our phone and we use that all the time. It's just there. And I can't remember when that transition happened. And at the moment, so I have worked in data and tech for most of my career. And I'm the founder of Labour Women in Tech. I was working for a software company before I founded Labour Women in Tech. I was working for a systems integrator before that. And I will still have people say to me, if I'm struggling with an app on my phone, but you're a woman in tech, why don't you know how to use it? I still get my daughter to sort the telly out. And I think that in itself can be quite overwhelming. There are so many different apps. There are so many different ways of accessing services, even digitally online. I have a daughter who is 17 next month, and this is where I realise we have changed. So when she has real money, she thinks that's like pretend money, and the real money for her, the thing that really resonates with her is seeing her figure go down on her Go Henry. For me, it's the other way around. When I've got physical money, that feels like I am far more mindful of how I spend it. But I am also mindful that we're creating a future for the next generation. So actually, it's me that needs to change my mindset because we're always progressing. Slightly digressing, but the point is here, we have had this incredible period of 20 years of us suddenly becoming digital that it's like honestly been drinking from the fire hose. And there is so much great innovation happening and fantastic products. Some are not so fantastic. That actually, and this is the opinion of Samantha, not necessarily the Labour Party, but of me and my background, is I almost think that the opportunity with AI is going to bridge this gap. And we are suddenly going to have as long as it's good information going in, we're suddenly going to be able to digitally empower some people that perhaps have not had the opportunity to go on the journey to using the physical applications themselves. So I appreciate I've slightly gone off topic a little bit. But to summarise, there is no silver bullet. We have the Skills England, ambition to make sure we're getting the right talents, and we want to and skills to people, and we want to lift people out of poverty. Everything else is the political will to do it. And I know that I'm really passionate about doing stuff with the Good Things Foundation in South Derbyshire, and that will be piecemeal, I suppose. We need lots of Samanthas across the country doing that. But yeah, no quick fix, but the political will is there.
Thank you, Samantha. And something that I find I struggle with politicians is it feels like inequality and social justice, so it's almost in one bucket, and economic growth is in a completely different bucket. Do you think the Labour Party and the Labour government understand that these two things are the same?
I should flipping hope so. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, because how can I mean you've seen it already, right? So we're talking about pushing powers out to the regions. We don't do well if London does great and the rest of the country is struggling. That's not fair. That's not sharing prosperity across the country. So absolutely, we get it. Yeah.
Fantastic. So we've got political leadership, we've got community leadership, we've got fantastic data, so now we need business. So Ali, you said that you lead responsible AI for Accenture. What do you think business role is, and how do you think Accenture in particular can work with those of us on the panel and in the audience to help us to, I guess, also understand the opportunities and the risks that AI might pose?
Thank you. A really well-structured question, and Samantha mentioned structured and unstructured. And I was asked to bring some structured thoughts, but all I have are some unstructured points to land with you. And I think first thing I want to just add on to what Simeon was saying earlier, and you mentioned, is that I think our own research shows that there's going to be a significant benefit to UK society and our economy. You know, something like 23% of our economy can be boosted by AI. Over the next 15 years, a huge sort of benefit there. But that's really going to rely on us bringing the workforce along, bringing society along. So there's an economic imperative around making sure that we're thinking about the role that AI can play. But I imagine all of us came into this room not really with that single mindset. It was really around maybe the moral imperative, the fact that whatever society we're going to build, it needs to be fair. It needs to be inclusive of all aspects of society. We need to avoid a society where we have some in our communities living a shadow reality, where they don't have access to services, where they can't engage with the workforce, where they can't engage with the richness of what life can be. And I think when you think about the role that AI is playing already, I mean, I came in, drove over from Sheffield today, where I have family, and I used AI constantly, you know, as I looked up where I needed to come, where there was local parking, when I looked at the program and what time I needed to be here, when I check the weather, all of these services that are already in our pockets, in our lives, are enabled by AI. And there are parts of our society today that are already reaping those benefits. You know, we don't have to look at Silicon Valley for those who are most ahead in terms of benefiting. Right here in the UK, there are parts of society that benefit. But we also heard from Simeon and through some of the data that was shared that there are huge parts of our UK society that don't benefit. And, you know, we really need to keep that moral imperative to really address that challenge at the heart of what we're doing. So I think today, part of it is going to be about reflecting on the scale of the challenge. And I've got some very current Accenture data to complement some of your data, which I want to share in a minute. But I think we also will need to turn our attention to what do we do next. And, you know, we're at the start of conference, and the PM's missions and the Labour Party's missions around growth and opportunity and the NHS and justice, all of these missions are going to be enabled by AI. Right? That's the reality of it. If you really want to extend the ability and the pace at which we will deliver these improvements and these services that are being promised, we will have to leverage this technology. Now, I can't predict for you exactly where our communities and society will be in its use in 5 years' time. Predictions make fools of all of us. But I can guarantee you it will be much more pervasive. And as an example and as an entry point into some of that data, I was speaking to my niece, some of us were speaking just before about universities, and it's the start of, you know, students going and starting their degrees. And my niece has just got a place at Leicester in her medical school. And we were talking about what society she's going to sign up to and what clubs and what she might do. And the scale of her journey ahead, how much studying she would need to do and what support she has. And leveraging apps and services, and she was given an iPad to do this, and how that would really help. And my slightly younger niece, who still hasn't started her GCSEs, and I said to her, hey, this might be you in a few years' time. And she said, no, by that stage, AI will be doing this for me. You know, I'll be able to make different choices. Now, maybe we'll circle back and just wonder whether that will be the case or not. But what I wanted to sort of point out was that when we think about the journey of our children, and what their futures will look like, we should recognize a couple of things. The survey that Accenture did was focused on executives and employees, so it's an industry-focused survey. And what that highlights is there is a significant divide. So when we think about the use of AI in companies today, around 43% of employees have access to generative AI, which is a current very advanced version of AI. ChatGPT is probably the most common sort of, brand or name that you probably have come across. So 43% have access. But if you dive into that number is 63% in London, and it's 38% in the rest of the country. So already we're seeing one type of divide there around the London centricity of access to technology. If we start to think about how access to that technology and its role in the workplace plays out when you consider educational backgrounds, those who have a higher education background, 48% have access to the technology. Those who come from a lower education background, it's 36%. So already we're seeing a divide there within the workplace, within employees. If we think about what it might mean in terms of gender split and balance, those who are male have 48% access compared to 38% who are female. So again, a gender imbalance in the way that access to this technology is delivered in the workplace. If we think about those who come from different socio-economic backgrounds, maybe low socio-economic backgrounds, 35% of those who are SEB have access compared to 45% from other groups. Again, within the workplace, current employees, people in my team, people in the wider organizations that we sort of work with. If we think about what is driving the use, even within those groups, of those from a lower socioeconomic background, 33% don't trust the use of this technology. There's a real lack of faith and trust that this technology is going to be of benefit in the day-to-day. And so these sorts of conundrums, these points that come through, I think do cause some issues. They will extend the divide that we already have even further. The haves will have more. Those who don't have access will be left behind. And I think that's something that we really have to put a huge amount of weight and attention around. And I'm probably out of my time on this one, but I'm just going to make a couple of more points if you'll indulge me. I think my role has been to really help organizations understand how do you operationalize AI and data responsibly. Sometimes we assume that it's the technology that needs to be responsible. It's not, it's us. As leaders, employees, just members of society, we have to understand how to use this technology for good or ill, and to the point Simeon was making. But within that, I think what we have to recognize is that many of the headlines you've probably seen over the last few years where there's bias or discrimination, maybe there's a deep fake of the Pope wearing a puffer jacket, or when you search for doctor, I'm thinking about my niche right now. If you Google for doctor or you search for doctor using one of these tools, it has an image of a man in a white coat rather than really representing the broader sense of society. I think a lot of those issues are really compounded by the fact that these systems are built in a way where society is not represented in that process, in actually being involved in building the very fabric of technology that we are using. And I think until we address that and make sure that all facets of our society included, we will have this issue persist. Last couple of points I just want to really lay out. Corporate responsibility within this space. There's simply not enough being done by industry to recognize this issue. We are starting to see the wheels really change now, but I think when we polled executives, 43% think the workforce isn't ready for the type of skills that will be needed in an AI-enabled world, but only 45% are investing in the training needed to deliver that. Right, so that really radically needs to change. I mean, this is not a sales pitch by any stretch, but as an example, Accenture, as part of its reinvention and regeneration of AI scheme, is trying to upskill 1 million people because it's so critical. And I think that criticality is because Gen AI skills will be table stakes for you getting a job in the future in corporations. There's a lot of pressure around entry-level jobs that we'll see coming in. So if you imagine this technology, if leveraged in a powerful way, in a supportive way, really augments your day-to-day experiences, that's great. But at the same time, we're likely to see the transition in terms of roles and the changes in roles leading to less entry-level jobs. So more people competing for jobs that require different types of skills. And so really being digitally enabled, having those skills become stable stakes. You really need to have that in place. And I think just the final point I want to sort of land is that when we think about what improvement this could deliver, and when I think back to my nieces, for the younger one, maybe she's right. maybe in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, when she's entering the workforce, she will be able to leverage this technology in a way that it can do so much more for her. So she doesn't have to worry about tracking how many books she needs to have got through, and it'll help summarize her lecture notes, and it'll do a whole bunch of other stuff. Maybe it'll do all of that. But at the same time, there'll be many other things that she'll need to sort of spend her time in, and we need to be thinking about lifting her aspiration. Right? I want her to be more aspiring towards our future. And I think if we're not really thinking about those children, those youngsters, those parts of society that right now maybe are not aspiring enough about how positive the future can be, then we're doing something wrong. And I think getting AI and our policy around AI will really either accelerate a positive future or really lead us to that divide expanding. And the last thing I'll say, and a few of you on the panel who know me have heard me say this before, my mother is a single mom, and she was an immigrant. She came to the UK nearly 60 years ago now from Pakistan. For the vast majority of her life as a proud British citizen, she's been excluded. You know, English was not her first language. She gets by just about. But all of the services, Hafsha, that you were describing that's so difficult to navigate are extremely difficult to navigate if you don't really have access to language and digital skills. And for her, the last 50 years of her life has been really difficult. But this technology also is a moment of optimism, because all of a sudden she's been given the tools to be able to access society in a way that she never had before. She feels liberated even with the state of what it can do today, never mind what it could do tomorrow. But I think part of trying to get to that point in a responsible way is going to mean we really have to focus on this issue today, because that's the foundation on which everything else will be enabled. I'll pass back to you there.
Thank you very much. I would just say that your niece might want to be an archaeologist or something like that. So I think that I'm hoping that learning is part of her future, but the way in which she does it might be different.
And even in that field, AI is really helping. So, you know, we help many firms really use AI technology to make sense of geospatial mapping, really thinking about where to look at crop yields, for example. And if you can imagine in one aspect of archaeology, really trying to understand is this bone or is this stone? What is this? How do you make sense of that? Right? How do you make sense of the data? Yeah. The technology will have a role to play. I just think wherever we end up with this technology, it will be so integrated into our lives. That's the one truth that we can hold on to.
And she could be a growth creator, so she could be an entrepreneur. She could actually create the new jobs for the future that we need so desperately in our country. So Rob, in Liverpool City region, you've done a lot of initiatives around digital inclusion. Do you want to just tell the audience a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. I think it follows on quite nicely with Ali's point around kind of that social value and the corporate social responsibility of different businesses and organisations that do have a role to play in terms of tackling digital exclusion. One of those is called the Digital Inclusion Initiative. So this is a programme we're piloting with Lloyds Bank, Vodafone, a company called Assurance, and a few other social enterprises that's working to provide thousands of free tablets with free connectivity from Vodafone, in-person digital skills training. So that kind of package I talked about earlier, those holistic kind of needs for individuals, making sure that we can build in the delivery partners from our community sector, local authorities, and then those services that are providing, things like back to work programs. So we can tackle economic inactivity, we can tackle, things like homelessness and kind of getting households into work. So really making sure we can be quite innovative, but actually having the private sector play a role in that. So it isn't always the public sector that is kind of, mandating that it has to be done this way, that actually brings with it a form of innovation. So, actually brings that kind of focus in. So whilst they might have a kind of commercial need in terms of services migrating online, that actually they're putting in those mitigations and interventions because they're funding different programs and initiatives. So that's something that's been really, really successful. We've also obviously looked at how we can partner with organisations like yourself, with the economy, who are a key partner as part of the National Device Bank. So as an enterprise as well, we donate all our old IT kit. So it goes into the National Device Bank, gets recycled, and then housed back out within the community in terms of the National Digital Inclusion Network. So again, that's something that we're really keen to push out across our other local authorities and other businesses as well, so that we create the circular economy where private sector can fill this kind of role to make sure that they can all work towards tackling this challenge together. And I think with the role of AI in that as well. There's some kind of things that we as Command Authority are looking at and are doing at the moment. So there's work going on in terms of the creation of an Office for Public Service Innovation, so-called OPSI. That's in the kind of business stage development with government at the moment, but that is very, very much leveraging kind of some of the work going on within data, looking at work from University of Liverpool, so Civic Data Cooperative, which we've established and funded, looking at how we can utilise the data from different services, so whether that's Department for Work and Pensions, localised industries, work on education skills, and then put in place-based change interventions as well, so we can really drive some innovation locally using some of the best talent and some of the best kind of resources there. So I think, with our kind of partnerships with devolution as a combined authority, it gives us that kind of edge to think about how to do things differently, partnering with both private businesses, national government, and then organisations on the ground as well. So that's been really successful as part of our wider digital inclusion programme to really leverage in some of those key partners and really try to make a difference in the city region.
Fantastic. I'm going to come to the audience in a moment, but in this digital world, my analogue pen has run out of ink. So if one of my team can, should we share a pen? Share a pen. We can share a pen, if you like. In August, Good Things Foundation was asked by the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology to host 4 roundtables looking at different aspects of fixing the digital divide in order to feed that back to Peter Kyle and to Chris Bryant, who's the Minister, who has a whole bullet point on gov.uk dedicated to digital inclusion. That might sound like a small thing, but I've been doing this job for quite a long time, and I've never had a minister before with a whole bullet point for digital inclusion. So they're definitely wanting to consult cross stakeholders and definitely wanting to act. And I'm really glad you talked about the role of working with public sector and with businesses, because we know that the budget is going to be tight. In fact, you can't turn on the radio without hearing that the budget is going to be tight. So we need our ingenuity, we need our innovation, we need to work in partnership, but obviously we need to maximise how we can share the investment in scaling the things that are working. That we, at a very macro level, so we wrote, I think, 45 pages of a summary report for ministers based on what the stakeholders said. But really it came down to 3 areas. The first one is about leadership. So every time a civil servant says to me, "But Helen, there's no money," I say, "There's lots of money, we just need to work together." And actually, one thing that we have been lacking from the previous government is leadership in digital inclusion and actual fundamental understanding that there is a deep digital divide, that it affects millions of people in our society, and without action, there won't be any solution. There is no silver bullet, but actually there's lots of knowledge about how to move that forward. So we want the government to prioritise digital inclusion, but also to provide that leadership. And so that's about convening, it's about collaborating, it's about listening, but then it's secondly about taking action. And I love mission-led, because digital inclusion and AI and technology is fundamental, as Ali said, to actually realising all of those key missions. And so it has to be embedded, but I do have a worry that we still have maybe a civil service, or we have people who say, well, this is my one important thing, without actually realising how other things can underpin that. And then we need to maximise working together in partnership around shared investment, but also coming right back to Simeon, a core data set. So, there is no perfect data set, but we can agree what those metrics are that will help us to measure the progression. So if we're going to act more together with new and enlivened and significant leadership, then we're going to need to know that we're making a difference, that we'll know in the communities, because we'll see it on people's faces, and hopefully they'll be feeling it in their pockets as well. But actually we need to make sure that we can prove and evidence that. So there, at a very macro level, what hours and hours and hours of consultation and came up with, but there's a lot more. So right, I'm going to go to you. Questions? Great. So I'm going to take